Hey guys, King of Charmers here to be your judge, your jury, and your analyst, and today I bring to you a full Fairy Wind analysis for Great League. This is going to put Fairy Wind in a matrix with Pokemon that are there. Thank you, LordPVPoke.com, for putting Fairy Wind so that we can go ahead and do data analysis and everything like that. But this is going to be incredibly simple. I'm not going to dive super hard to any particular mon. I'm going to give you the matchups and just how they look in a matrix. Something really simple and something just highlighting key points because Fairy Wind is actually very interesting. As you see here, I already put the list on here of what Pokemon can actually get Fairy Wind. Clefable, Galarian Rapidash, Galarian Weezing, Chansey, Blissey, Togetic, as well as Togekiss, Cottonee, Jumpluff, all the Flamby family, Aromatisse, Slurpuff, Sylveon, Klefki, Cutiefly, Ramambi, and Tapu Koko. I'm only going to analyze Great League mods. I'm not going to do it for Ultra League. Ultra League's a different story for another time, but for Great League, this is what we have. So I'm going to put all that's already viable in Great League and pop it in to see if we get Fairy Wind. The only thing as of right now that's very likely going to happen is if you look at those star charts, looks like Clefable is going to be a Community Day, and Clefable is going to get Fairy Wind for said Community Day. But it's going to be, this intro is going to be really quick just because there's a lot of stuff to analyze if you really want to dive into it. But I'm going to do the 2 shield, 1 shield, and the 0 shield. Quick therapist mental health today. Make sure y'all drink water. Make sure y'all get plenty of sleep because sleep is very important, as well as water. If you're not hydrated, it can give you symptoms of anxiety, depression, etc. because your body's trying to survive. Just because you're dehydrated. But yes, those are my that's my quick therapist mental health tip of the day. Without further ado, this is Fairy Wind with all Great League eligible mons as much as I can. Short, simple, and the deep analysis will come later in a later video. But for now, we're going to do a quick analysis, and this is Fairy Wind for those eligible mons, and let's get started. Alright, now that we know exactly what Pokemon get Fairy Wind, I did the homework for you, or rather just like the legwork. So I put every single Great League mon that could learn Fairy Wind and put it in the matrix. Every single one that's viable anyways. I'm not going to put like Cutie Pie since we don't even know what it is, or like Hoppip with Fairy Wind and pop it into the matrix. That doesn't make any sense. But this is going to just kind of give you some groundwork and just give us a glimpse of what it's going to look like once Fairy Wind gets on certain mons. We can already assume that Fairy Wind is probably going to be on Clefairy Community Day. If that's a thing, it's probably likely going to be a thing, since you saw the thing on Season of Light, that's all I'm going to call it, Season of Light. So the next upcoming season, Clefable will probably get Fairy Wind. That's probably the likely one. Other than that, the rest of these are pretty speculatory. These are the ones that can get Fairy Wind. Niantic's been pretty good about letting Pokemon that have, matching a Pokemon that have moves at what it is. That's why they took out Dragon Tail off of, for those of you that remember, Kyogre was supposed to get Dragon Tail. It didn't get Dragon Tail. It just got Waterfall. So that's what changed. But this is these are all the Pokemon that can get it, at least the viable ones for Great League, and we're going to run into a matrix. I already did for the 2 shield here, so I'm going to analyze each shield scenario. I'm going to run through it really quickly. Just everything notable and just things that might look. But we're going to go through every single one of the meta just is like super fast. Because there, as you see, there's a 1, 2, 3, there's a lot of mons here. I put Clefable, Galarian Rapidash, Galarian Weezing, Blissey. These 2 are probably going to be the most, these 2, like not even looking at, these 2 are something to look at. Blissey and Chansey. Togekiss, Whimsicott, Aromatisse, Slurpuff, Sylveon, Klefki, Tapu Koko. Yes, Tapu Koko, you can, if it comes out in research and it does happen to get Fairy Wind, it can belong in this category, and it could be terrifying because it has Brave Bird Thunderbolt. We also have Jumpluff in here as well. So I put Fairy Wind on all of them, and this is what you get for the 2 shield scenario. So these are the 2s as you see, and then we're going to go down each and every scenario. Obviously, Altaria is going to die to almost every single one of these except for Slurpuff, just because Slurpuff doesn't have anything super effective as in Fairy type or can do neutral damage against Altaria. It resists both Flamethrower and Energy Ball. And if you look at Jumpluff, you just have Acrobats and Energy Ball. So in the 2 shields, you don't do well, especially as Altaria does super effective damage Sky Attack against Jumpluff. Against Arachnid, even though it's super tanky, it does lose to several picks here with Fairy Wind. Not a lot of them, but a notable one is Galarian Weezing, Blissey and Chansey, of course, like I mentioned to you, Togekiss, as well as Clefly and Jumpluff. So Jumpluff can take out Arachnid. That's probably just due to Acrobats. Fairy Wind is a Mudshot clone, so that means it's going to get your fast moves very quickly. However, you can also do super effective damage against fighting types, etc. So let's see what happens here. For both all versions of the Azumarill, a lot of these picks do beat Azumarill in the 2 shield, as you see here, in all variations. Ice Beam, Hydro Pump, or if you have Ice Beam, Play Rough, or Play Rough, Hydro Pump. No matter which one you have, a lot of these Clefable, Rapidash, Weezing, Blissey, Chansey, Whimsicott, Aromatisse, they beat Azumarill. So a lot of these Pokemon will take out Azumarill, which is great. The one thing that Fairy Wind users will hate is Bastiodon. Obviously, Bastion will probably annihilate you in almost every single shield scenario just because it does resist Fairy types, and Bastiodon is a Fairy type's worst nightmare. Blissey, Chansey, and Sylveon can tackle really tanky things like Cofagrigus as well as Cresselia in the 2 shield. So Blissey and Chansey as well as Klefki over here, especially just because Klefki resists Psychic type attacks with Cresselia's Psycho Cuts. And Jump Bluff as well. Jump Bluff can win as well. Deoxys defense, because you resist counter, a lot of the Fairy Wind users can beat that as well. Diggersby, Drapion, Frostless. Galarian Rapidash probably is the I would say the spammiest, but you already have Psycho Cut, so just replacing Fairy Wind with it does allow you to be Drapion with Poison Sting. Even though Galarian Rapidash doesn't take super effective damage, that's why, because of Poison Fang. Other than that, it basically, you beat Drapion if you're not using either a neutral one, like with Klefki, or if you want a pure Fairy. So, things like Frostless can be beat by Blissey and Chansey. If you look at it, there's a lot of green with Blissey and Chansey. Despite that, with Fairy Wind, even though you have Fairy Wind, it does allow you to break through charge moves. Unfortunately, Shadow Machamp, Go Machamp, as you see, Machamp, if it's not a Togekiss with triple resist counter or Sylveon, it does beat a lot of the Fairy Wind users. Notable Dark types will lose. Both ones of Mandibuzz, Alolan Marowak does resist Fairy type moves because it's a Fire type, so that's why only Blissey and Chansey win. Medicham does take super effective damage against Fairy type moves, so that Fairy damage might add up. As you see, Clefable, Galarian Rapidash, Weezing, and Chansey will be able to take out Medicham. This one's really interesting because Chansey is a normal type and it takes super effective damage from counter. But Sylveon and Klefki can beat as well as Jump Bluff. So going through this, if you look over here, most of the poison type, most poison types will beat these except for Chansey. As you see, Chansey is nuts. With its ability to cover poison types with Psychic, it actually can run through a lot of these. Obstagoon, Pelipper. Pelipper is squishy. Obstagoon does take super effective damage from Fairy Wind. As you see, a lot of them beat them into 2 shields. As well as Sableye. You lose with Galarian Rapidash just because it's a Psychic type, so you take super effective damage. And still Pokemon like Whimsicott, just because Whimsicott's not going to be able to muscle its way through into 2 shield against Sableye, unfortunately. Scrafty hates Fairy Wind users. It beats all of them except for Klefki and Tapu Koko. And I'm guessing Klefki and Tapu Koko just beat because they rev up, and Scrafty is I think this is bait dependent, because I think both of your shields, they get taken by power-up punches. But still, Tapu Koko and Klefki are the only ones that literally lose out. As you see, other notable things, Swampert, Galarian Stunfisk. Unfortunately, a lot of the high pressure mons will still beat you. Of course, things that resist it like Skarmory, we already mentioned that. Beat you. G-Fisk beats you convincingly. Swampert will outpace a majority of this roster, and Talonflame as well. So, it's you beat what you're supposed to beat, but Fairy Wind does allow you to beat some notable things overall, like we mentioned earlier with Azu. With Azu, some tanky Pokemon, Deoxys defense, and it's a sizable, I wouldn't say charm, it's still charms. Charm does charm things, but as you see with the amount of pressure it can give you, it's just absolutely nuts just how Fairy Wind, especially since it's a Mudshot clone, can do really well. Umbreon loses to charm users anyways, but majority of Fairy Wind users will beat them as well. You can even beat Venusaur with Togekiss as well as Blissey and Chansey. So, running through the rest of these, if you look at the averages for the win-loss records, there's one notable mon that really kind of sweeps. Yeah, this is disgusting. As you see, Chansey in the 2 shield has a 44-3 with a 638 rating in the 2 shield. This means that Chansey, outside of those 3 losses, which is Galarian Stunfisk, Registeel, and Bastiodon, out of those 3 matches, Chansey can beat every single other Pokemon in the 2 shield. I love Chansey. Maybe this is a good idea not to give Chansey Fairy Wind. But as you see here, like I mentioned with the multiple matchups, it's pretty much Azu for the most part. Azu and Araquanid, because Araquanid bug types do resist Fairy Wind. But as you see, the pressure still allows some of these mons to beat it. And of course, Chansey, she's bae. If you don't believe it now, in 2 shields, give her Fairy Wind, she's bae. This is proof. Alright, we did the 2 shield, now we're going to do the 1 shield. So for the 1 shield, you start losing a lot more. 2 shield seems to be your best, just because a lot of the fairy typings don't have a ton of bulk. A lot of them are either squished, they're not super squishy, but outside of Blissey and Chansey, and Jumpluff, not all of them are the bulkiest things in the universe. So as you see here, if we run down in the 1 shield, Altaria, the Burb hates fairies to begin with, so even with Charm, Altaria hates fairies to begin with. In the 1 shield, running down, Azu's a notable one. As you see here, with Togekiss, Klefki, Jumpluff is probably the one that wins the most in the 1 shield out of this first block right here. As you see here, 1 shield Jumpluff can beat Araquanid, all versions of Azumarill, Cofagrigus, as well as Cresselia, and Blissey and Chansey does, while the rest kind of fall off a little bit. Clefable, since we're likely getting it for Community, I'll focus on a little bit on this one too. As you see for the 1 shield, you can take out Azumarills. So both versions of Azumarills, unless it has Hydro Pump. So if they bait you and Hail Mary Hydro Pump, you can win, but it looks like with Play Rough, since you get but it looks like against Play Rough Azu, over here, just because I guess it's slower, I think you'll be able to clutch up the matchup. Deoxys defense still loses. Blissey and Chansey does have Blissey, Chansey, and Jumpluff, as you see here for Cofagrigus and Cresselia, notable one. Sadly, these aren't super popular, but beating them is nice. Deoxys defense cries when it sees Blissey and when it sees Fairy Wind typings, just because counters resisted, like in the 2 shield. Diggersby is in the same boat here. Diggersby, you start beating it a lot more. You could be with Clefable. You could also be with Blissey, Chansey, Togekiss. Whimsicott is able to do so just because Grass Knot is super effective against ground. You also have Slurpuff, Sylveon, and Jumpluff. So Jumpluff is able to Energy Ball its way to victory, especially if it has Fairy Wind because of its charge capabilities against Diggersby. Drapion, you still lose against a majority of them, except for Blissey, Chansey, and Klefki, with Blissey and Chansey being the most notable ones. Like I mentioned to you before, Psychic is the reason why, and Hyper Beam. And Galvantula, even though Galvantula is a bug type, as you see here, it does lose in the 1 shield against a lot of these Aromatized, Slurpuff. Sylveon's able to beat Galvantula. Tapu Koko, Clefable's able to go through it as well. If you go through it, Clefable is able to beat Deoxys defense, Diggersby, Frostless, Galvantula, and Jellicent. So it does win a lot of interesting matchups in the 1 shield, to where you could possibly, yeah, it's very. I'm looking at Jellicent here. I'm like, how do you beat that with Fairy Wind? So you could beat it, Fate, straight Moon. So it looks like you double Moonblast, and then you go ahead and Meteor Mash. And it looks like Shadow Ball is enough to kill you in the 1 shield against Jellicent. I'm guessing it's because Jellicent's exceptionally slow, that's why. So they try to go Shape Ball. If straight Shadow Ball, they lose. You're also able to beat Shadow Champ now. In the 1 shield, Shadow Champ does lose just because of Fairy Wind typing, but it's a really close matchup, so I wouldn't bank on it. Mandibuzz gets aped by a lot of the Fairy types as well. Blissey, Galarian, Chansey, etc. I mean, Galarian's Weezing, Galarian Rapidash as well. What I mean by Blissey and Chansey is Shadow Champ is able to lose against Blissey and Chansey, even though counter is super effective, just because it has Fairy Wind. So Psychic, you're able to Psychic it to death. Psychic poor Machamp to death. Other notable ones is that with Fairy Wind, you can beat Mew and Medicham as well with Clefable. Blissey and Chansey do great. Aromatize and Whimsicott can win as well. It looks like Slurpuff here doesn't do well just because of its lack of a Fairy-type stab move, and with Gov coverage with Flamethrower and Energy Ball. But Sylveon does get some picks with Medicham and Mew with Fairy Wind. And Jumpluff as well. Other notable things are probably have to be Alolan Ninetales with Galarian Weezing and Clefable. Clefable's Meteor Mashes are able to just absolutely annihilate Alolan Ninetales from the face of the planet. Alolan Ninetales, it's double super weak to Steel type moves, so your Ice and Steel, Ice and Fairy are weak to Steel, are both weak to Steel, so it's double weak to Steel. So you just Meteor Mash its way to victory. Obstagoon also falls prey, as well as Sableye and Scrafty because they're dark types. Outside of that, it looks like a lot of the Fairy Wind users will lose to generally what they're supposed to lose against, or if they get outpaced, like with Pokemon, like we mentioned, 2-Shield with Swampert, as well as Talonflame. Treff can also just absolutely ape its way to victory by just Shadow Balling and Seed Bombing its way to victory, as you see here, just because the charge move pressure is way too much. Venusaur loves you unless it's Blissey and Chansey. So if you go down, once we look at the overall analysis, Clefable, since this is the mon that's generally going to get the most, I'm going to do a separate video for Clefable once it comes out, but like it looks like it does get a decent amount of matchups in the 1 and the 2 shields with Clefable. Blissey and Chansey are the clear breadwinners here, especially Chansey. So if you thought Chansey was broken, the 2 shield, look in the 1 shield. In the 1 shield, there's only 2 Pokemon it will lose against. It loses against only Registeel and Bastiodon. Other than that, it beats everything else. Yeah, it beats everything else. It even beats Galarian Stunfisk. Mind you, Chansey can be... Yeah, Galarian Stunfisk loses against Chansey. I don't know how the hell is this possible. Do you need the debuff? You literally straight Hyper Beam. I'm not even kidding you. You Hyper Beam and Psychic. And even if they go straight Earthquake, you still win. As much as I love you, Chansey, you must not be allowed to get Fairy Wind. I'm sorry, girl. God, that's too broken. But yeah, outside of it, it looks like Chansey can win the most, as well as Sylveon. So Chansey and Sylveon are good breadwinners for Fairy Wind. Those are the 2 most viable ones too. And like I mentioned, Clefable is likely going to get that Community Day for the season, for whenever it comes up for the Community Day. But that's Fairy Wind's likely going to be its signature move. But if Blissey and Chansey ever get Fairy Wind, as you see, they're going to be the big winners in the 1 shield as well. And last but not least, we have the closers. So took a little bit of a look for closers. I didn't do that for the 2s and the 1s too much, but for the 0s, it's actually really interesting when I looked into it. So in the closing scenarios, I would say the Fairy Wind users outside of are the strongest in the closer. So you can leave in the back and do some sort of like destroying sweep strat, or like if you do the 2 shield breaker strat and then just leave them in the back to try to sweep, if you're able to take out a lot of their heavy weaknesses, like Bastiodon. Because of course Bastiodon, every fairy type user's worst nightmare is going to be Bastiodon. So with that being said, here we go. And unfortunately, Granbull doesn't learn Fairy Wind, because if it did, every Bastiodon would cry because close combats would be firing off like no tomorrow. It would literally be One Punch Man, except it would be you and your entire team, sadly. Maybe not you, but Granbull chooses violence, but Granbull isn't on this list. So in the closer, as you see here, Blissey and Chansey, we already know they're absolute beasts, but Galarian Weezing goes off against Altaria, Araquanid, Azumarill, and all 3 versions of Azumarill with Sludge and Play Rough. Sludge is it's going to sludge its way through other fairy types and Play Rough against other, it's going to destroy fighters and other fairy types with Galarian Weezing. It's just absolutely nuts at its sweeping ability with Fairy Wind. Other things like Whimsicott, Aromatisse also get really powerful, as well as Sylveon. So Sylveon with Psyshock and Moonblast, look at the amount, look at these numbers. Mind you, anything close to 500 is bad, but they're not, I mean, it's close, but these aren't even like close to 500. A lot of these matchups are 600 plus, so you'll win very comfortably. Of course, the one thing you can't beat, and damn Wallface, that's all I have to say, damn Wallface. Cofrodriguez, Cresselia, only covered by Clefable. This is where Clefable shines a lot. You beat Cofrodriguez, Cresselia, and Deoxys defense in the 1 shield, in the 1 and the 0 shields. Klefki also does really well, as well as Jump Bluff. Sylveon only beats Deoxys defense, but you know what? That's good enough. Or not for a pure fairy typing with the coverage it has, it's good enough. You're also able to beat Frostless, Galvantula, Jellicent, and Licky with Clefable. And Chansey and Blissey go to town, of course, against those combinations. Even Aromatisse and Slurpee, Puff, Sylveon, and Klefki, as well as Jump Bluff, they're able to come out with some winning matchups in the closers, as you see here. Drapion, pure fairy types don't like Drapion too much, as well as Diggersby. Diggersby is just super thick, and as you see here, it's able to take out Clefable, Galarian Rapidash, and Weezing as well as Aromatisse and Tapu Koko. So Drapion and Diggersby against pure fairy typings, just because our fairy typings in general, just because Poison Sting is super effective, it does a lot of work, as well as having Crunch, which is an incredibly powerful move to begin with, even though it's resisted. Well, I'm blabbering off. Sludge Bomb. It has Sludge Bomb. That's why. Sludge Bomb hurts against fairies. Even if they carry a subtyping that's weak to it, it does neutral damage and it sucks a lot. But, interestingly enough, Klefki is able to beat Drapion. So I don't think they'll give Klefki Fairy Wind. Even if it does get Fairy Wind, you will have access to it through France. But if you look at it over here, you can actually beat Drapion. Because I am wrong. Steel is double super resistant to poison. So that's why. But it's Klefki. Other notable things is obviously Machamp. Like, Clefable's able to beat Galvantula, Machamp, Lickitung, Shadow Machamp, Mandibuzz, and Medicham. So most of the other fighters, including Lickitung and Jellicent, in the closer. So Clefable Sweep in the closer looks very, very good, are leaving Clefable with shields. Blissey and Chansey go to town, we already know that. I already mentioned to you, Ormotees as well as Klefki are able to take advantage of these matchups as well. Slurpuff and Sylveon, Whimsicott, Togekiss, Tapu Koko, and Jumpluff. While they did well in a lot of other combinations, they don't do well against Lickitung. With the only ones beating Lickitung is Klefki, Aromatisse, as well as Clefable and Blissey and Chansey. Medicham loses against Fairies. That's all you need to know. The only thing it really beats is Togekiss just because it has Ice Punch in the closer. Just because Flying is weak to Ice. Alolan Ninetales loses. Obstagoon. Poor Obstagoon gets obliterated. Sableye and Scrafty as well. Stunfisk. Toxicroak. Yes, Toxicroak, even though it has Sludge Bomb, as you see here, Clefable, Galarian Rapidash, a lot of the Chanseys in the... a lot of the Fairy types in the closers with Fairy Wind are able to close out. Umbreon loses, of course, Dark types. Vigoroth and Walrein. Interestingly enough, in the closer, Clefable is able to take out Walrein. Even though Walrein has Icicle Spear, if you run the Sim with it, it does double Meteor Mash is enough to take you out. Walrein won't be able to win against the closer because it doesn't have enough energy. A little bit of an energy lead might be able to flip it just because Icicle Spear, as you see, it's 4 energy, so a little bit of extra energy will be able to flip this matchup. But in general, if it's dry and they're going one-on-one, Clefable can close out. And that's pretty... No one plays Daddy Cash anymore. Even though Daddy Cash took a lot of money in the previous seasons, you don't see a lot of Daddy Cash anymore. I mean, you still see it in some cups, but just not recently it won't. And Wigglytuff going Wigglytuff and die against a lot of... Just because Fairy Wind outpaces Charm users. And the average overall is very good. Clefable is a breadwinner. A breadwinner. In the usual, like, where it would kind of... I wouldn't say struggle, it still has somewhat of good, like, balance against a lot of the overall meta. As you see here, Clefable does really well. Meteor Mash being a community move, and it's Metagross' signature move. With access to it with Clefairy, it's crazy how strong it is, and Moonblast as a stab, and yeah, Moonblast as a stab move, so it's really nuts. Blissey and Chansey, especially Chansey, in all scenarios, this thing, never give this thing Fairy Wind, that's basically what I have to say. Aromatisse, Sylveon, Klefki, and Jumpluff do have some advantages in the closer, as you see here. Outside of the rest of them, they come out with a positive outcome in the closing scenarios with Fairy Wind. So some of those do have play, but I would say overall, the ones you would probably look at the most, if you had to really look at, is probably going to be Sylveon, Clefable, Blissey, and Chansey. Those 4 probably have the most chance out of everyone else, not only just because they're accessible. Whimsicott, other than that, under the honorable mentions, Whimsicott, Aromatisse, and Slurpuff. Even though the closer they not be strong, but they could be interesting in other categories, as well as Jumpluff. Jumpluff Bullet Seed Acrobats, because of its ability to... It's very interesting for Jumpluff. But with the ice types being so dominant, you might not want to double ice weakness like Jumpluff onto your team. But it's still an honorable mention. Like, it's something interesting to look at if you're trying to use it against that meta. For example, if you take out Walrein and then you have Jumpluff sweep in the back, or if Jumpluff's able to land an energy ball, it might actually take out Walrein in the closer. So that's assuming it doesn't have any energy. That's why you see these two being really red. But those are the honorable mentions as far as Fairy Wind goes. And that's GG's. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. There's a reason why I didn't make this too complicated, because a lot of the mentions, etc., this is just assuming that said Pokemon get Fairy Wind. I don't believe that Blissey and Chansey will ever get Fairy Wind. If they do, it's a huge mistake, because if you just look at the data here, they're absolutely going to tear through all of Go Battle League, and literally you will see XL Chansey in every single Open Great League team. And everything will count, yes. It's going to be use Chansey or die to Chansey. This would make Chansey one of the most powerful meta Pokemon in Open Great League, which I totally approve of. So even though my heart and soul says I want my girl to be the best, she's gonna be a boss-ass bitch. I'm not gonna get banned for that. Well, I hope you don't ban for it. But yes, she's gonna be absolutely amazing. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen, so don't worry about it. But as you see, it would be absolutely broken if they got it anyways. Clefable is a clear winner here if it does get the community with Fairy Wind. It's in the closer and just with all scenarios. If you could run a 2 Shield Breaker strat, pair that thing with Swampert, and that team can go to town. especially since Swampert can cover fairy typings because it can be Bastion as well as the steel typings, which would be the fairy's biggest problem. But yes, that's what it's like. Clefable and Swampert look hand in hand together as a very great core if you want to put them together. But there are other clear winners as here. I already mentioned them, in like Whimsicott, Aromatisse, Sylveon, Slurpuff, and even Jumpluff have a lot of interesting things if they do get Fairy Wind. It's going to be a lot of fun with to play it. Do I think Fairy should have been buffed? Not really. It was, we all kind of knew it was coming, like Fairy, like a lot of people in like articles everywhere, like tweets was like, okay, Fairy Wind, give Fairy Wind so that fairies can get a different thing. I guess the good thing that comes out of this is with fairies getting a buff, well, not all fairies, but if Clefable does see some insurgents in like Open Great League, then that will drive away Metachams, etc. But I wouldn't say it would draw them away completely, or fighters or dark types in general, because they're still obscenely powerful. If that's the case, then a lot of people will just be making a lot of anti-Clefable teams. So anti-Clefable teams are anti-Fairy Wind teams, so just skills would run everywhere against teams, because that's how like balance goes. But it still seems like if you put Clefable in like a closing scenario, or a lot of these mons in a closing scenario, they would do really well as closers, just because of their movesets overall, along with that new Fairy Wind energy generation it gets with Fairy Wind being a Mudshot clone. But that's my analysis there. Is this a good thing? Yes, and kind of bad because we've hated fairies for the longest time, but at least you won't see Charmers everywhere. Except now you will have to disseminate between whether or not what you see in front of you is a Charmer or a Fairy Wind user. So outside of looking at the animation, that's pretty much it. But it's good to see some fresh, the fairies getting a fresh, like, a fresh overhaul and like something kind of like new entering. The reason why I'm not too sold on it is because if you didn't know, fairies coming out the first time around in BGC, they were extremely powerful for a reason. Fairies were there to literally stop the dragons from taking over the world. That's why. And psychic types. That's why it was there. And steel was, yeah. That's why fairies, when fairies came out. But some new things coming up, so it's a little exciting. I mean, but it's only Clefable that's going to get it, very likely, versus the other mons. Well, who knows? We'll see about the future. So, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Do me a huge favor. Please like, subscribe, and comment. If I didn't go super into every single one of your mons, I'm not going to do that. It takes way too long. I gave you a lot of general information. When it comes to speculation, I only look at what might be actually super solid. And like I mentioned, the only Pokemon that looks like it's going to get Fairy Wind as of right now or very soon is going to be Clefable. Outside of that, everyone else is speculatory, and please don't give it to Chansey or Blissey. Especially Chansey. I mean, give it to me as like bias, but yeah, don't give it to Chansey or Blissey. I stream on Friday to Monday in the mornings. If you don't know that already, I do appreciate seeing y'all on Twitch. Also appreciate your support here on YouTube. Good luck on your Go Valley sets, and I will see y'all in Season 12.
That I made